Namaste and greetings. I, Fiza Mahajan, visiting researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, Nai Delhi, extend a warmest welcome to you all for joining us for Day 3 of the Feminist Foreign Policy Fellowship, an online international winter school program. This 3-month immersive leadership certificate training fellowship is proudly brought to you by the IMPRI Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies and the IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center in collaboration with the Asia Foundation. Our chair for this program is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI and former professor at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. We are grateful for her continued guidance and leadership. She is also one of our experts for today, along with Dr. Deepika Maan, Assistant Professor, GD Goenka University. We will share video recordings of each session to support flexible learning at your convenience. The guideline document will be emailed to you after the session for your pursuit. Before we start today's session, I would like to announce the housekeeping rules. It is imperative that you join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise and refrain from making general comments in the question to save time. Now, I would request Professor Vibhuti Patel ji to start the session with her opening remarks.
Yeah.
Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Fiza, for your welcome address. And first of all, I would like to offer my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Ms. Nandita Barua, Ms. Apurva Singh, and the coordinators of this very important and massive program, Mr. Satyam Tripathi, Ms. Vithita Jha, Shweta Shankar, and our moderator, Fiza Mahajan. Today's expert, Madam Dr. Deepika Maan. She is also going to be with us. We welcome Dr. Asha Hans and all the dignitaries who are here today with us. The brief recap of the day one, where Dr. Simi Mehta provided profile of previous 2 courses on feminist foreign policy and reported that this course has 1,100 participants from varied backgrounds, countries, professional life, and policy-making institutions and think tanks, both within India and globally. Dr. Ms. Nandita Barua, co-organizer of this course and fellowship program, in her erudite opening remarks, began with introduction of the Asia Foundation and the International Development Agency with country offices in 19 Asian countries. She pointed out the political discourses on feminist foreign policies are relatively new for the global south, and she emphasized that the issue of diversity, equity, national security, foreign policy, securitization must be embedded in feminist foreign policy with gender and intersectional lens. She said that initially feminist foreign policy was driven by larger framing in the global north, but the massive Beijing conference in 1995 fostered the opening space where feminism was debated in a context, in different contextual and its relevance. My introduction was about the whole genesis of feminist foreign policy and the International Women's Decade and the Nairobi Forward-Looking Strategy, CEDAW, ICPD, structural adjustment programs, and neoliberal globalization that also resulted in transnational feminist solidarity. And we had a keynote address by Ms. Stephenie Foster, who started with an enthusiastic statement that we are in an exciting time in the field of feminist foreign policy. You may like it or you may not like it, but you can't ignore it. There are a lot of discourses are happening currently globally, in global north as well as in global south. She talked about the 4 constructs which are very important for feminist foreign policy, which is gender equality, broadening of the definition of security that includes food security, health security, security for the refugees and migrant people, and internally displaced people, and the climate and the refugees of the climate change. Third one, she said, is the elevation of diverse voices that is very important. So the intersectional, the marginalized communities, they need their voices need to be heard and amplified. And the fourth one is that addressing historical power imbalances, and also the defense spending versus the social sector spending, and also the question of 500 years of slavery and 200 years of colonization, so which has created such a massive income inequality. So the debt relief was also the issue she mentioned. She narrated the historical context and many layers and foundations of feminist foreign policies, and she also ended with a humorous note that it is the pale, Yale, and male who have come up, who have played important role in establishing all the Bretton Woods institutions and IMF and World Bank and GATT and also all the other important global institutions. And currently only 16 to 18 countries have feminist foreign policy. And that was followed by a highly engaging discussion. And then we had day two, where Professor Sanjukta Bhattacharya was extremely erudite, and she also provided the origin and trajectory in theory and praxis of feminist foreign policy, and she examined the question of feminist foreign policy from the lens of international relations theories, theory of realism, constructivist theory, which talks about the structural, cultural, and social construction of the reality that impacts international relations. And she also talked about the Marxian understanding, neo-Marxian understanding, and the cosmopolitanism. And she said, where are women in international relations theory, in policy and praxis? And she said that women are just used as variables. Women's international relation theories emerged as a result of the second wave of international women's movement, and the challenge it challenged male dominance in the academic knowledge. International theorization, relations theorization that was singularly focused on war, an exclusive and state-centric nature of dominant realist theory that is based on knowledge, was informed by male dominance in a public sphere. So critical and normative perspective, like feminism, got traction only after feminist institutions gained, such as CEDAW or Nairobi Forward-Looking Strategy in 1985, Beijing Platform in 1995, UN Security Council Resolution 1325, underpinning feminist foreign policy, and also Sustainable Development Goals also have included it. So far, 101 countries have drawn up National Action Plan for implementing UNSC Resolution 2024, and 9/11 tragedy impacted international relations negatively. That's what she said. And that was also followed, her session was also followed by very intense Q&A session. We had Dr. Kesab Giri, who spoke on international relations and Eurocentrism. And he talked about the colonialism in its epistemic avatar needs to be understood, deconstructed. He talked about the social phenomena such as power of extraction and a European experience of which is always treated as a universal experience, and that experience is of war and competition and technological advancement and European advancement and civilizing mission, which the colonialists had adopted. He summarized the theories of John Hobson, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, Edward Said, to show how Eurocentrism hammered superiority and universality of European culture, and the decolonialism gets rid of Eurocentrism and adopts indigenization. In 1903, he talked about William Edward Boyce, who penned the phrase, "The problem of 20th century is the problem of color line," and the relation of the darker to the lighter races of men in Asia and Africa and in America and islands of the sea. So this is how he said that this itself shows the power equation, unequal power equation that exists between the global north and the global south. Dr. Keshav also stated that the way to decolonial future lies in decolonization from the Eurocentric foreign policy. He also talked about the Edward Say's 1993 critique of quote-unquote sensibility in Jane Austen's Mansfield Park, in which illuminating the relationships depicted between the manor home and plantation, country and city, where there is a no mention of the people who were serfs and who were colonized slaves, and even the colonial human beings. There was a complete erasure. So even in the creative writing and in the serious writing of the colonial times, we saw that the complete absence of acknowledgement of colonial exploitation or the slavery. So in the process of decolonizing, knowledge produced has to be transformatory. And he also gave examples of anti-colonial struggles by Srimati Yogmaya in Nepal. And also he talked about Dr. Hansa Mehta, who got in the UDHR that all humans are born free and equal, that well-known statement which Dr. Hansa Mehta made when the Universal Declaration of Man was declared. Universal Declaration, and he spoke about marriage equality clause included in the UN document by Sharifa Hamid Ali, who was inducted as a member of Status of Women's Committee way back in 1946. Yeah, she was also AIWC president in 1935. He found that major contribution of feminist foreign policy was a departure from national security to human security, and it came from the global south. So expansive understanding of security came as a result of international women's conversation in the Mexico conference in 75, Copenhagen in 80, Nairobi in 85, Beijing in 1995. He also, when he was asked that what can we do to decolonize our thinking, and I think that the decolonized feminist future, it enshrines, promotes, protects human rights of all, seeks to disrupt colonial, racist, patriarchal, and male-dominated power structures, and allocates significant resources, including research, to achieve the vision. So look, he talked about the localization of universal human rights by drawing on the liberative oral expressions that was extended by me, that even in Therigathas by Buddhist bhikkhunis way back in BC 80, or the religious reform movements from 12th to 18th century, and the 19th century social reform movement in South Asia, and Fatima Mernis's work focus on providing a voice of oppressed and marginalized women in Africa, and also women freedom fighters who work with Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar for the Constitution of India. These are the experiences of localizing the universal human rights, and they are not only talked about by women's rights, but they went beyond the boundaries of class, caste, religion, and spoke about rights of the marginalized. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for summarizing the past sessions in such detail. Now, I would like you to address us on the topic of intersectionality and gender mainstreaming in the global south. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you. This is the session. Yeah, 1 minute. I need to upload my. Why isn't it visible? Is it visible? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, in the very first session, the framework of fellowship program was discussed. In that also, this was very important aspect, that is intersectionality and the gender mainstreaming in the global south with regards to feminist foreign policy, which is founded and on the principles of transformative and systemic changes, intersectional approach, post-colonial and anti-racist focus, collaborative and inclusive approach, and for the all marginalized sections, and the cross-cutting and coherent way in which we need to examine and implement the feminist foreign policy. Now, earlier also it was said that how the women's movement, global women's movement, was focusing on women empowerment from 70 to 80. And then by 1990, we started talking about gender mainstreaming. And after 2010, the major concern, both in the Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals, have been social inclusion of those who have been excluded from the policies and programs and implementations. So this was also told by my previous speakers, that the whole trajectory of feminist foreign policies being adopted by different countries, starting from Sweden, and now even the Mexico and Morocco from the global south have also adopted this policy. So the feminist foreign policy, when we talked about, there have been many ups and downs, and Sweden has reverted back. There are so many countries who are now talking about the gender equality policy. Most of the Asian countries, they consider the term feminism as anathema, and they are talking. But there are countries which are talking about feminist trade policy, feminist development policy, and feminist foreign policies. So these are the three terminologies which I use. But the most important element in this whole discourse is about the question of intersectionality, the inequality and the intersectional vulnerabilities of different communities and sections of society. I think that is very important. And it came out very sharply when the UN Women gave a slogan that nobody is free until everybody is free. So that is very important. So we have to walk the last mile. So the universal understanding of the feminist perspective is that we are responsive to the post-colonial socio-cultural reality, hierarchical international relations, local political dynamics, and the lived experience of the citizens in specific country, and the diverse voices need to be taken into consideration. So the first summit, with Feminist Foreign Policy Summit, that took place in Sweden, which echoed the women's rights are human rights and all, which was a slogan popularized in 1993 Vienna Conference, where all women's organizations the initiative was by the United Nations Human Rights Council. And that was the time where first time the official adoption of this concern that you can't have a dichotomy of a women's problem as a personal problem and the only war-related or the territorial issues only as a human rights concern of the UN. So it highlighted the gender-based violence, trafficking, and refugee crisis. The summit accepted the need for paradigm shift from being reactive to proactive, and the feminist perspectives in international relations demands deconstruction of hegemonic power structures and systems that create policies that favor a microscopic minority. So it is not only the G7 or G5 who should benefit from the relations. All the trade relations have to be just and sustainable and mutually enhancing and empowering. Hence, it is imperative to challenge the patriarchal systems of injustice, exclusion, exploitation, oppression, and marginalization, and perpetuation, which perpetuate inequality. So I think this was a very important understanding which was arrived at in 2022. And feminist foreign policy not only focuses on international relations between the nations, but also on the political cultures, the schools of thought that determine economic and political priorities, and also the human rights of the socio-economically underserved sections of the society. So even the internal domestic policies are also come under its purview. Now, when it comes to UN, the UNHC had taken a very important decisions in the year 2000, and mainly the issues on agenda when we talk about the international feminist praxis. First is the fight against sexual and sexist violence. Second one is education of women and girls, and that of men and boys in the developing country. So that is education becomes a very important agenda. Supporting such endeavors in the economically weaker nation states. Economic emancipation of women across the world involved, that means in enhancing the work participation focusing on the labor relations, fighting against the modern form of slavery and the wage theft, which is happening in a big way in the informal sector. According to ILO, only 6% of women have a secure job. All others are a precariat labor. The remaining 92%, 94% in the global economy also, the workforce is it's casual, it is exploited, and it is precarious. Most of them happen to be migrant workers. Involving women in politics and decision making, that is very important. Enhancing, so many countries of global south have now at least enhanced women's participation in the local self-government bodies, but still we have a lot to achieve in terms of women's active role in the legislative bodies as well as in the parliament of the nation state. In India also, we have only 14% of women who are in the parliament currently, and we have now passed the bill on women's reservation, which may be implemented by 2029. Even in the legislative assembly, except for 1 or 2 states, we don't have more than 15% participation of women in the legislative assembly. Only in the local self-government bodies, we have 50%. And overall, if we see that nationally also, women are, most of the states, more than 20 states have 50%, remaining at 33%, and Kashmir and Nagaland, they have not implemented the women's reservation in the local self-government bodies. Involving women in the peace negotiations and peace treaties is very important. It is not only just sending the peacekeepers in the countries with which are destroyed by war or which are having civil war, but in the negotiations where you have agenda setting power and the peace treaties are made, that too women's representation, their leadership, their voice should be there. That's what we are striving at. Currently, what we see, whether it is in the context of war between Ukraine and Russia and the war in Gaza versus Israel, there also global women's movement has stuck out consistently, though we have not been able to stop it. But efforts are made. No one is just sitting quiet, watching, just being an onlooker. But every day statements are released and women are protesting all over the world. Address the issues in the diplomatic mission regarding marginalized sections such as ethnic minorities, religious minorities, sexual minorities, oppressed caste, and oppressed nationalities. That's very important. As a central concern of feminist foreign policy, gender equality ensures that women and girls enjoy fundamental human rights that the global community must strive for as an obligation within our international commitments and prerequisite to achieving broader foreign policy goals of peacemaking, peace building, and peacekeeping at the same time as security concerns and sustainable development. Now, we need to understand the material reality and the historical context which has created a new challenges in front of the international women's movement and the women's movement of the global south. First of all, the economic globalization at one level increased people-to-people contact, but it also increased trade relations which were more advantageous to the industrialized country and less advantageous to the global south. It also created a space for conversations on differences, especially the intellectual property regime or the general agreement on trade and tariff, or the question of various free trade zones which have come, over 200 free trade zones which have come up in Asian countries, or the NAFTA in the Latin American countries. So does feminist foreign policy is vocal, or does it take stand? And I think that is a pressure on the countries which have adopted feminist foreign policy, that you need to take up these hardcore issues, no? Another issue is that of a multiple catastrophe of the where after the Ukraine war, we saw that the conventional war is back with the current Russian invasion of Ukraine, and also we can see the much more barbaric form in which the attacks in the Gaza Strip are being made. So wars and conflicts at nearly 48 major locations, and also 200 locations where the conflicts are going on. There are unsurmountable problems which are faced by women. A lot of documentation is done by the WPS agenda. The women who are working on WPS, and they have collected massive documentation right from 2000 to 2024. The urgency of robust discussion on contingencies of war, women, peace, security agenda, the core concept of feminist foreign policy, we need to what extent has it delivered? In fact, in the previous session, it was said that it has not delivered. That has been the feeling of women activists and the scholars and international relations experts from the global south. The UN Security Council Resolution 1325 adopted in the year 2000, and after that, 10 more resolutions being adopted on the peace agenda. We need to do a serious review of it. And we need to even chart the roadmap for inter-parliamentary unions, so that the way European Union has created its inter-parliamentary union, more and more dialogue among the elected representatives, and growth in multi-stakeholder policy. That means in a peace delegation, what are the defining approaches that we can take so that we can have a result-oriented approach being adopted by the global community. The qualitative change from quantitative, that is very important. It is not only the number of meetings, the way you have COPs and climate change meetings after meetings take place, but still the responsibility of the industrialized countries, it is everything gets monetized. No, you pay the fine and continue polluting the planet. That kind of dialogues, we need to transcend that, and we need to have a qualitative change and challenging the binaries that marginalize women in diplomacy, that women are the nurturers, and by nature they can't handle the hard topics of diplomacy and war and all. They can do the soft job of working in the refugee camps or providing support to the survivors of wars. Another thing is that whole dialogue in the diplomatic circle, that women are emotional and men are logical, or women are victim and men are violent. That's not true. We have seen, and I think Dr. Bhattacharya in the previous session also reminded us what happened in Abu Ghraib, this thing where women soldiers from United Kingdom, they were the ones who were involved in extremely barbaric and abhorrent way of torture of the prisoners from Iraq, because it was a defeated country, and they had to undergo such a traumatic experience. And after that, the world community also protested, and but still not much action has been taken for this kind of war crimes. We have International Criminal Court, but in that also now, like the activity regarding war crimes need to increase. Now, when we talk about women in diplomacy, so women who are participants, they are not decision makers, mainly because of this whole gender-based division of labor. Women have to navigate challenging stereotypes in domestic as well as global space, an intersectional perspective which demands that the geographical and cultural differences, that means representation of within the nation state also in the diplomatic negotiations, representation of women from various sections or various vulnerable who are facing multiple marginalities of caste, class, ethnicity, race, religion, region, that also should be taken care of, and their voice should be amplified. When it comes to global voices, I think there should be demand for equity and representation in all the global bodies of gender minorities and women from global south. Work with women, not work for women. That is the slogan which the International Women's Movement has raised. And power for women, not power over women. That is another very important slogan that has emerged in this context. So the core concept of women in diplomacy has to be bottoms-up approach, and the political participation of women, not only as voters, but also they must stand for election, and we have to create the ecosystem. All nation states need to create the ecosystem, and there should be global pressure also to see to it that more and more women get representations in the upper echelons of power structures. Formal recognition of women in decision making through national legislations, which is very important. The way we fought for nearly 20 years to get Women's Reservation Act in September 2023. I think many nations in many nation states, this kind of efforts have been happening, and some of them have succeeded also. And the several countries have not ratified optional protocol to CEDAW. I think even India has not ratified optional protocol, especially on the issue of child labor and child marriage. India has that. These are the reasons, and plus another thing, that if your nation state doesn't respond to your violation of human rights, if the National Human Rights Commission doesn't, can the organizations or individuals within the nation directly approach the World Cup, the UN system? So that has not been accepted by most of the countries in the global south. So we need to do advocacy for that, that there has to be optional protocol, that if the communities and the civil society organizations are not finding any space or not finding any bargaining power within the nation state, when the state is very oppressive or autocratic or indifferent to the concerns of the civil society organizations, then they should have access to the global community or approach UNHC or United Nations Human Rights Council. Now, when we talk about the bottom-up approach, we have had a very, very important historical legacy right from the time of early 20th century. We all gave the example previously also, that how women came, the suffragist movement, which also united so many women from European countries, or we had an anti-war movement before First World War and the Second World War, and also when it came to the whole International Women's Year in 1975, the regional, national, and global discourses that took place, and so many issues on which, whether it is a population control versus sustainable development, or whether it's a population versus development or population and development, even all those debates that took place in even Cairo conference could happen only because of the global dialogues that happened. State-to-state dialogues were happening, and at the same time, women's movement from different countries, they were also coming and sharing views, whether it was a question of harmful contraception, or whether it was a question of a very draconian population policy, or the laws about the migrants, or the global trafficking, or question of environment and sustainability, and also nuclear testing. On so many issues, women's movement and the think tanks and the human rights organizations globally were discussing, and there was a representation and voices of all and that is why we could crystallize our charter of demand. For example, Fiji Islands, they fought against nuclear testing. There were so many countries, the industries which were harmful, and they were releasing pollutants within the sea, and that affected the communities and the ecosystem. Those issues came to light, and the global solidarity came after the Chernobyl tragedy, when contaminated dairy products were sent from the European countries to Malaysia. There was a global outcry against it, and the ship had to be sent back. They diverted the ship to India, and that time Indian women's movement, they were at one level, they were filed public interest litigation that we would not allow such contaminated dairy products in India. And we got solidarity. We got the global women's movement also supporting such events. We have experience of FINRICH, Feminist International Network, on reproductive rights and against and genetic engineering. Lot of sharing took place, and sharing of scientific documentation, sharing of histories, sharing of experiences of harmful contraceptives, and why things which are banned in the global north, they are dumped in the global south. So I think these solidarities were extremely important, and that's why bottom-up approach becomes very important. We have seen similar thing, the stirring slogans which came up after the capture of, which captured the essence of women's protest across the world. For example, in Afghanistan, women and girls are asking for right to education, freedom to move, and opportunity to play. And then also, under the extremely draconian circumstances, the solidarity, there is not much publicity in praise, but at a ground level, lot of give and take is happening. In China, women are asking for representation and voice in political sphere. In India, Muslim girls are fighting against being thrown out of school and colleges for wearing hijab. And we saw that so much of support was provided by the women's groups, human rights organization, and also girls from the majority community. In Mexico, women fight against femicide. There was a massive struggle which happened in Mexico, and later on in so many Latin American countries also joined. In Chile, women marched against gender-based violence, and that anthem against gender-based violence has now become translated into more than 100 languages throughout the world. In USA, women are fighting against withdrawal of women's right to abortion. So the global solidarity for even Ukrainian women against sexual violence perpetrated by Russian soldiers, and now solidarity for women from Palestine and women, children, and the citizens of Palestine, that is also emerging not only from one country or from the global south, but even the Jewish population, which is completely traumatized by this kind of a savage war. They have also stuck out their neck, and their everyday statements are being made. Now, when it comes to women in peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building, we know that we had a very painful experience when the Indian peacekeeping force was sent to Sri Lanka, where there were so many reported cases of mass rape that happened in Jaffna. After that, India has also changed its policy. We are sending women for peacekeeping and peacemaking, peace building. And we got a very good feedback that women make up 35% of the UN heads of peacekeeping and special political mission, and 48% of deputy heads. That means still they don't have such a important portfolio. But when it comes to peacekeeping, it is the women who have played pivotal role. In fact, their work in Liberia, Indian Army's work in Indian women who went to Liberia, the women and children who were completely under trauma, and they are withdrawn, and they were secluded because of the horrific experience of the civil war. They were counseled, their morale was boosted, children were taken to school, our women soldiers were accompanying them for shopping and asking them to come out, and they got rid of their fear psychosis slowly and gradually. So we have seen this kind of experiences, and that is why even when we talk about the Sustainable Development Goal, which has adopted twin approach of all 17 goals in which you have to do gender mainstreaming, and dedicated goal of gender equality, which is goal number 5, where all stakeholders, whether it is a society, that means politics, and the general socio-political condition, that has to be addressed by social groups and individuals, civil society organizations, and also whatever the science and technology, because in the 21st century, technology has played a very, very important role. We are in Industry 4.0, and the communicative discourse on sustainable development that has been talked about in the all the review meetings of Sustainable Development Goals. So underrepresentation of women in diplomacy is a very important concern that came in day 1. That came even in day 2, but I think what all we can do in terms of women, increasing women's leadership, and that to collective leadership. Individual leadership can be, individual leader can be only biologically woman and cannot, they behave like man only because they try to emulate male model, because they have made their space in man's world with great effort. But when it comes to collectively women entering into this kind of diplomatic mission, where there is a gender concern, gender responsiveness, where they have agency, they have a voice, they have representation, they have agenda setting power, I think that can change the scenario, and that we have seen. Those who have done studies of women in European Union, some of them, they say that yes, to certain aspects, they have the extent, they have been successful in bringing women's agenda, especially the gender responsive budgeting or the question of more social sector budget in the nation state. They have been able, but when it comes to major issues such as Ukrainian war or the war in Gaza, I think that they have not been so effective. Or what can be done to become more effective when such hardcore issues are faced by the humanity? So very important way in which we can deal with it, the gender space. Another very important issue is that of a climate change and climate calamity. So how the environmental changes are impacting the communities and nation states, who is bearing the burden of the increasing global warming or the kind of development trajectory that has been adopted by the world capitalism. A lot of questioning has been happening. The sustainable development goals which are decided which are the countries which are not emulating them in praxis. About that also discussions are happening. And what we see is that there are institutions which are focusing seriously on feminist foreign policy, and they say that it provides a powerful lens through which we can interrogate the violent global systems of power that leave millions of people in perpetual state of vulnerability. And in other words, feminist foreign policy involves a government making domestic and global gender equality issues one of its central goals, and it is a multidimensional policy which aims to improve the experiences and the quality of life of women and marginalized groups. And it means that we need to constantly focus on power inequalities, and we need to talk about it, we need to write about it, and we need to bring it up in all the important diplomatic and global discussions. So 1325, about that also, a lot of critical reflection has been happening. And the question of homelessness, sexual violence, disease. We had a global pandemic, and it's discriminatory impact of global pandemic, and most vulnerable were the countries from the global south. Even when such a major tragedy happened, the multinational companies, they were not ready to subsidize the vaccines. In fact, for the first time in the human history, we saw that people had to purchase vaccine. Okay, we all are used to, earlier in the 19th century, vaccines were given were free of charge by the nation state. We have smallpox vaccine or anti-malaria tablets, all of them. But now the public sector budgets, public health budgets have gone down. And these are the conditionalities by the international institutions in the name of stabilization policy, where the poor countries are forced to drastically reduce budget for public health. That has also created and more commercialization of health industry, and the pharma industries. They are the major culprits. About that also, many voices from the global south have come up, in fact, the African countries. So the question of feminist foreign policy, when we talk about the 4 important pillars of feminist foreign policy, is that participation. We need to participate in the global debate. It is very important. I think earlier also it was said that think and act globally and locally, both. So we need to, even when we are working at a local level, we need to understand the political economy and how it impacts our local reality. And at the same time, we need to reach out to the global institutions, and we should create structures and mechanisms and systems by which we can take our voice or amplify the voices of the citizens or the affected community or the vulnerable communities in the global platforms. Protection seeks to ensure women and girls' rights to be protected, and we need to promote the ecosystem. We need to promote all the measures which can ensure more protection to women, and the prevention, which refers to all forms of violence against women, and the Security Council, which came up with the WPS agenda in the 1325. After that, we had 1828, 1888, 1889, 1960, 21006, and 2242, 2467. 2493. All these important resolutions, I think we need to popularize them even in our study circles, in our camps, and we should talk. We just can't be mute spectator when it comes to global issues and this. So it is also said that whenever women are there in the peace table and in negotiating peace, they see to it that whatever is adopted, especially the women's movement in Nepal, has played a very important, pivotal role in the peace agreements. And they have also seen to it that it just doesn't remain at the level of elite diplomats, but common people also, and the popular masses, they also know about it, and they talk about it, and they also pressurize the government. So the concept of human security, when we talk about in feminist foreign policy, so we are the feminist foreign policy expands the concept of human security to economic security, health security, environmental security, peace security, community security, and political security. That means we are including in our agenda the question of poverty, question of disease, violence, removing threat to the people due to trafficking or homelessness, empowerment of the community, and building a better systems. So gender issues and the human development issues, they both are integrated in the strategy of the feminist foreign policy, and both in the public realm and the domestic realm, they are included. So the international security, human rights, and international political economy, we are also addressing the international political economy and what are the implications of the economic policies adopted by the nation states, which are also imposed by the organizations like World Bank or IMF or the funders and donors. That also comes to scrutiny. So to counter the gender stereotypes created by the patriarchal system and structures, we must give the top priority to both state and non-state actors to decide the agenda. So it needs to include the feminist foreign policy, needs to include in its agenda the understanding of the business activity or the natural resources, water and energy, all the important concerns into its agenda. And we need to have a gender-sensitive foreign policy as with a multidimensional framework, which aims to include women's experiences, also the experiences of the gender minorities and religious minorities, ethnic minorities. So gender equality today for sustainable future tomorrow, that is the major thrust of the feminist foreign policy. These are some of the important writings which I have referred to by Dr. Swarna Gopal, Maria Jessen, Citizen, and various documents written by the activists and public intellectuals from Global South. And even I see RW's document, which I think Professor Bhattacharya also mentioned, Defining Feminist Foreign Policy 2021. All these documents are in public domain. You can freely download them from the internet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for an inspiring and enlightening session, I would say, on intersectionality and gender mainstreaming. The discussion on addressing layered inequalities and promoting an inclusive approach to gender equality were truly enlightening. And your insights have provided us with a nuanced understanding of how intersectional perspectives can shape transformative policies. Really grateful for the session, ma'am. Thank you so much. Can we move on to the Q&A session now?
Yeah, please. But if Dr. Deepika is there, then let her present.
Sure, ma'am.
Then we can take both the sessions together because
sure, ma'am. No worries.
She has a...
So I would like to now invite Dr. Deepika Maan, Assistant Professor, GD Goenka University, for her address on feminist approaches to peace building, gendered solutions to conflict resolution. Over to you, ma'am. Deepika, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, are you there? Maybe we can move on to Dr. Vaishali Singh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to welcome Dr. Vaishali Singh. She is the Assistant Research Manager at IMPRI, and she'll take us through the discussion on essay and article writing. Over to you.
Thank you, Fiza. Can we have the presentation first? Hello.
Yeah.
Priyanka, can we have the presentation?
Yes, I'll just need a second.
Okay. Thank you so much. A very good evening to everyone. Today we are going to have a short and brief presentation on the various components of research article writing, which is a important and compulsory component of the fellowship as well. So the PPT is going to reflect upon how the various components of research article writing from idea to publication. If you can move to the next slide, please. Right. So the key stages of research article that is a researcher needs to take into account before they start writing the research starts from the identification of a research idea. So the research idea starts from identifying a topic of interest within your field area. For example, if you're working on feminist foreign policy, so the topic is going to reflect and going to be limited to that area aspect. And for that, we'll start with making an abstract that contains a brief background description, problem statement, and the major research questions that your article aims to answer to. And the review existing literature to identify those gaps, controversies, or areas needing further exploration. The aspect of research idea is to understand the various gaps that are already existing in your research as well, and formulate research questions or hypotheses that address the gaps in knowledge. The second stage that comes into research article writing is the literature review, which is to conduct a comprehensive literature review to understand existing research and theories related to your topic. Also, literature review helps you to understand the gap area of your research and what is that component that is missing from the research that you are going to take into your research. And it will help you identify the relevant methodologies that you can adopt in your particular research, or the theoretical frameworks that is more relevant and apt to your research based on already conducted literature or available literature that is there, and finding from the previous studies as well. Critically, it will allow you to critically analyze and synthesize the literature to contextualize your research. So literature review, if you conduct a very systematic literature review, it will help you to understand your topic in a very thorough manner with the various themes, with the identifying the right methodology. And also when you're writing the literature review, it is very important to adopt an in-text citation. You're supposed to give the proper references of the various articles, books from where you have taken the idea from the author. For example, we have provided you an example here. You can give an example of the author name and the year in which that publication was published, followed by a full reference at the end in the bibliography section. Then yes, you can conduct a systematic literature review on your topic using AI as well. It will help you to map out the various diverse literature that is already there existing. and find the right literature according to your research. We have provided you few of the examples such as Skyspace, literature mapping tools like Research Rabbit. It has also been provided in your guideline document as well for your reference. If we can move on, please. Right. Then another stage that comes while you're about to write a research article is the research design, which is again a very important component of your research article writing, because that defines the right methodology that you have adopted in your research. For you're supposed to first define the research objectives, the various objectives that your research is going to undertake, and along with the aims based on the identified gaps that you have identified through a literature review. And you're supposed to select the appropriate research methodology. It can be experimental, observational, qualitative, or quantitative approaches, and develop a clear research design, including any of the sampling techniques that you're going to adopt, if it's going to be a qualitative or a quantitative based research. What are the data collection methods and the analysis procedure that you're going to adopt in your research. The data collection and analysis is the next stage of your research writing article, which includes the collecting data using your chosen methodologies and techniques, and then employing a rigorous data analysis to find the method to your research design. And this will allow you to interpret the results of your data collection with respect to your research questions, and it will help you to prove or disprove your hypothesis based on that. We can move on. Great. Then comes the final stage, which is the writing the manuscript. This is where you have, this is the stage where you put your idea of your research, of your data collection into writing. And this is usually a structural, which is obviously based on the various journals that you're going to give your article for writing. For example, if there is a certain layout that the journal expects you to provide your research article into. For example, if an introduction is supposed to be provided, the methods are supposed to be provided separately, results, discussion, conclusion. Usually this is the layout that all the journals expect a researcher to submit their article into. And in the writing manuscript, you're supposed to write clear and concise introduction that outlines your background of the research, the objectives of the research, and the significance of the study that you have undertaken. Also, you're supposed to describe the methodology in detail, how you have selected the participants, how you have done the data collection and analysis procedure, if any of the methodology has been adopted by you. Then present the results objectively using table, figures, and statistics where necessary to support your research questions and to provide for better understanding to the readers and the reviewers as well of your research data collection. And the manuscript also expects you to provide your implications of your findings and how it will contribute to the existing literature based on your research that you have done, and to conclude by summarizing it in the form of key findings from your research, the limitations that that you faced during your research while conducting it, and any future research direction that you would like to provide based on your research that you have done. So this was the key stages of the research writing. If we can move on to the next, right. Now we have come to the contents of a standard report that is expected by the researchers to submit. So there comes a title page where you're going to include the title of your report, your name, the date, and the institution or organization you're affiliated to. Based on the permission by the institution, you can put the institution's logo and graphics in the title page itself. Then comes the table of contents, which provides a clearer, comprehensive table, and along with the page numbers where you have provided the further details of your research. Then comes a list of abbreviations that you have used throughout your paper. You're supposed to list them here along with the page number if it's required by the layout of the journal that you're submitting. If it's not, then you can avoid using the page number as well. Then comes a table of list of tables and figures as well. Wherever you have mentioned table, you're supposed to provide table number 1, table number 2, figure 1, figure 2, and you're supposed and the detail of that table, and you can list it out in this list of tables and figures. There's another component which is list of case laws. So most of the time when you're doing a lot of research oriented, there's also an aspect of judicial approach or case studies that you take into account. So after a list of tables and figures, you can include a list of case laws as well if you have taken references or you have mentioned it in your research paper. You can list out the list of cases that you have provided in your research article. Then comes an executive summary, which usually summarizes your objectives, methods, findings, and recommendations in a concise and engaging manner and include the most important highlights and key takeaways from your research. Then comes the introduction part, which will provide an overview of the research problem, its significance, and the research questions. Also, the objectives of these studies is to be provided in the introduction itself. Then comes a literature review, as I have discussed it earlier as well. The literature review is going to highlight the various existing literature that you have referred to for exploring more methodology or to explore the research gap that you have taken into account. So that aspect will come under the literature review. We can move on. Yes, abstract and executive summary is similar. In some cases, they provide as an abstract. Usually in a layout of a dissertation or a thesis submission or a report, we mention it as an executive summary. For journal articles and for journal articles, we provide an abstract. The methodology is the part where you describe your research design, the different approaches that you have taken into, which can be quantitative and qualitative or any mixed methods, the data collection method and the sampling strategy. Then how you have justify your choices of your research methodology that you have adopted, and any ethical consideration that is to be taken while conducting your fieldwork-based research. If you have, you're supposed to mention it in the methodology itself, whether you have taken permission, you have from the participants to conduct the research, whether the consent was taken into account. All of this is supposed to be mentioned in the methodology itself. And the results will be mentioned where you can present your findings clearly and objectively using the charts, tables, wherever it is appropriate to support based on your research questions as well. And you can provide a detailed analysis of the data here itself in the results, and any kind of significant relationship that was discovered as part of your research can be provided here itself. If we can move on. I hope the PPT is visible to all. Yeah, it is visible to all. Ektaji, kindly check your network once. Then comes the discussion part where you interpret and analyze your results in the context of existing theories and literature that is there. Then you can discuss the implication of your findings and the significance and any kind of limitation that your research has been addressed, and again suggest few areas of future research that can be taken into account. The conclusion part is where you can summarize the key findings, recommendations. Also, you can restate the research objectives and how they were achieved. Right, and you can, as I said, you can provide a recommendation for further policy makers, researchers, practitioners. That is the part where will be included in the conclusion itself. If we can move to the next slide, please. Right. After all of your write-up is there, we have the references, which is very important component where you provide, wherever you have provided the in-text citation, you're supposed to provide the details of your references at the end, which is the references or the bibliography section in detail with the author details, the journal name, page number, year of its publication, or if it's a book, then a detailed reference of the books as well. Again, it should be in a very alphabetic style by the author's last name itself. And the appendix is a section where you're going to provide the extra information of your research, which includes photographs, which can include the tables from your data analysis. And you can also include the survey questions if they were, it was more on a quantitative or qualitative research methodology, and any kind of interview transcripts that were there. You can all provide it in the appendix. You can also provide a copy of the particular act if you have referred into your research. You can provide the detailed act at the end in the appendix as well. If we can move to the next slide, please. Yes, the next step is editing and revising, and which is an important aspect again, because you're supposed to check the any kind of clarity, coherence, accuracy, grammar mistakes, or any kind of sentence formation. For that, it's important to go through your article review manuscript, which will help you to get feedback. Also, it is advisable to send it to your feedbacks to experts to get some kind of more input into how you can improve the quality of your writing. And when it comes to the submission and peer review, usually in the journals, when you provide it for submission, there's a step called peer review, where your article is on the manuscript is submitted for review to an expert, or if it's a peer review, again, it will be submitted to the expert, where they'll give you comments to the manuscript, and you'll once you have received the feedback, you're supposed to incorporate that feedback and give the revised manuscript to the journal for it to get published. Also, it's important to understand the expert review is something where they check the quality, originality, and significance of your research manuscript that you have conducted. So keep into account that it's a very thorough process, and experts give their comments based on that. If we can move to the next slide, please. Then comes a publication where after all the steps of editing, revising, feedback has been incorporated by the author. The remaining formatting and proofreading is done, and finally it is given for publishing purpose. Also, it's important to adhere to the ethical guidelines, which includes proper citation practices, and also checking the plagiarism aspect, which is usually 10% below. It should be below, the manuscript should be below 10%, which is the advisable limit. And above that, it's not considered fit for the publication purpose because of plagiarism, where ideas, if it's not given due recognition of a previous existing literature, and the author has simply incorporated, it's considered cheating, or it's considered, taking away someone's idea. So it's important to give due recognition of any of the ideas that you have taken from previous existing literature and provide it in your in-text citation, bibliography, references, wherever you have taken it. So it's important also to check through plagiarism and provide it for the plagiarism report writing. Thank you. And the next slide is going to be the ethical. This is a list of the previous cohort publication that we have from Law and Public Policy Fellowship. These are all the, this is provided at the IMPRI Books website, where you can see how the various research was undertaken by our fellows, and different methodologies were incorporated. This will be helpful for you to understand how to go about writing the research article. Yes, the additional tips are going to be ensure that the literature used is cited and the report is plagiarism free. Formatting is important to pay attention to. Also, revising your manuscript is important to understand if there are any kind of grammatical sentence formation or that is required to be changed. Also, include relevant charts and graphs and images. So this will be a list of additional tips which I've already discussed in the previous slide. So kindly ensure those whenever you're writing, we are always at IMPRI, you can write it to us for any kind of clarification while you're writing. We'll help you out in that aspect if you have any doubt while you're writing the research article. Thank you. If you have any doubts, just write it to us, or you can ask us at the chat box as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Over to you.
Deepika ji, first, do you want to go first, or should we answer the question? Your wish. Hello. Okay. So I think the first question is that, can you throw some more light on whether it is gender-centric issues are important for peace agreements to be successful, or is it more number of participation of women itself enough? Maybe both, but what is important? I think the most important, the way UN has also crystallized it in collaboration with the global feminist movement, is that it is very important that women are identified as contributors and agents, not only as victims or person who needs specific, whoever specific needs, no? So they need to have their collective wisdom can also be very, very important in deciding the course of action. Number two, that all the agreements should also incorporate clear gender-sensitive modalities for implementation, no, and monitoring. That means that women's participation at every stage of implementation is very important. and also the provision, allocation of resources, which in terms of funds, functions, and functionaries. No, all three are very important, and they should be done in consultation with affected community and all the stakeholders. Third one is the conflict-related sexual violence. Every time there is a conflict or disaster or war, women are the ones who face the worst form of violence, even the sexual violence that they have faced, and also so many unwanted pregnancies, which also happen as a result of rape. So that is also women's concern of the services which are provided by both for the mental health and mental well-being, and the reproductive health needs of women. In that also, women's voice should be heard. Like, for example, in Bangladesh war, when it happened, more than 1 million women were raped. So many of them were pregnant, and their abortions were done even in the 9th month of their pregnancy. Can you imagine? The French doctors were invited, and there were camps, and nowhere women were just seen as a problem. They were not. Nobody even asked them what they wanted. No, whether they wanted to continue the pregnancy, or what concern for their health at such a late stage of pregnancy. What would she may lose her life? So this kind of thing should not happen. At least in Bangladesh war, because of the medical friend circle, they saw these young doctors, they got totally disenchanted, and they documented it. In so many other wars, things are not even documented. Fourth one is that sexual violence can be used by the predator to continue the same acts of war outside the purview of agreement. So even in the normal days after the war gets over, even after the ceasefire, this kind of blackmailing and sexual violence continues. And we have seen from the records of the First and Second World War what used to happen in the occupied territories. So the cycle of vengeance and vigilantism that happens after war, we have even Malala's autobiography shows that, what kind of vigilantism that women have to face, and which creates more and more restrictions and control over women and girls. So that needs to be taken care of. Fifth one is that if these issues are not addressed, then sexual violence can undermine confidence in the agreements, and also even mediation process itself, as we saw even in the case of Ukraine war, or even currently what is happening in Gaza. So it is very important to include specific provisions of gender-based violence. Even after ceasefire or in the peace agreement, there has to be clear-cut understanding about it. You just can't leave it as a personal problem of a woman. It is a very important problem which the nation is facing. Mediation strategies that systematically include women and civil society more broadly, they are more likely to generate ownership and support for the negotiated settlement. Why in Nepal, you see even civil society organizations, they talk about peace negotiation because they were involved in the process. So it is very important that all stakeholders are involved in the process, and also they should be responsive to the specific needs of women and girls, men and boys, who are contributing for a sustainable peace. So if we want peace to long-lasting and sustainable peace, it is very important that people's participation and very meaningful participation is there, and also gender responsiveness in the preventive diplomacy and also conflict resolution approach efforts, as it happened in case of Rwanda. It also happened in case of Somalia. Some of our feminist friends have said that in the Truth Commission, how the Truth Commission functioned, or how the International War Crime Tribunals were functioning, international criminal courts were functioning. They asked the affected people who were in the refugee camp, who were homeless, who were violated, who had bruises, and they were the ones who were giving their testimony and also suggesting what can be the long-lasting solution for peace. So I think that is very important. Second question is that about the project proposal, that for the extended abstract, when we ask for an extended abstract, because some of you have sent 350 words, 500 words, 700 words, extended abstract have to be of 2000 words, where you also would include the review of literature, whatever literature scan you have done, gap analysis, what are the gaps in the current body of knowledge on topic chosen by you, and also what would be your research methodology and your logical flow of this thing, which you can capture in 2000 words. That is where that should be there in the extended abstract. Third one is the research needs time and money. Do we have to raise funds, or IMPRI will give us some financial assistance? I don't, that is beyond my purview. We have to ask the Asia Foundation. They are the ones who are financing, but I don't think, I don't know. You can, you can bring it up in the meeting. I think, Vaishali, you can take it to the Asia Foundation.
Yes.
Now, is the topic of my PhD I'm pursuing, okay. Will I be expected to write on a subset or the same issue? I think PhD, it has to be similar topic, but you can't use the same material for your PhD,
Yes.
because
Yes,
PhD is a very confidential matter. So you will have to choose the topic, which not only topic, but how you treat the topic. That has to be, that can't be the same as in your PhD, this thing. And the last question was there in the chat box, where there is a question about there is one more question, is there? Yeah.
I think, ma'am,
What is the ideal for the matter of
wants to
hospital
ask.
address style? That is explained. There was one question which I saw. I think it needs clarification.
Abstract and executive summary are similar, that one?
No, they are not similar. Abstracts are like, they are just taking the main highlights of your article, while the executive summary would be a summary with all the sections in it. The executive summary would be more than abstract. Okay, abstract can be subset of executive summary, but executive summary has to take up all the highlights and the salient features in your article. No, that would be written after the research is over. No, while abstract you are submitting before your preparation of your chapter. Executive summary will come after you complete your chapter and you give the major highlights of that. So over to, yeah.
All right, ma'am. There's one more question in the chat box. In a country like India that has so much diversity, do you think this concept of intersectionality is relevant? Suppose one wants to conduct a research on Dalit feminism. So this particular concept of Dalit feminism itself consists of two intersectionalities, that is sex and caste. And within that also there are various intersectionalities like class, financial independence, etc. Ma'am, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think you have answered your question. Because there is a diversity, there are multiple marginalities, different locations, different standpoints, socio-economic, cultural, political locations. We need intersectionality. You just can't have a one rule for all, and the differential impact of whatever developments which are taking place, that demands that we take we become responsive. It was in fact the Dalit feminism in India which brought the issue of intersectionality center stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Simran Napeet has raised way. Miss Simran.
Yes, ma'am. Namaste. And thank you
Yeah.
so much, Vibhuti, ma'am, for your insightful presentation. We got so much understanding on the intersectionality and as well as women participation in diplomatic approach. Thank you so much, ma'am. And also happy Diwali to everyone.
Yeah, happy Diwali. Yes, yes. You're doing so right. Thank you.
Okay. So my question to you would be like, with Nepal, it's a party to the optional protocol to CEDA. So how can this, like feminist foreign policy framework strengthen the mechanisms to support women, especially Nepalese women who seek justice under this protocol? And you see, ma'am, like what specific actions can be taken to ensure that there are many like marginalized women in
Since
Nepal,
when did I ask the phone?
including those in remote areas. So how can everything should be, like with regards to access on these rights and protections, which has been offered by CEDA itself. So especially given the barriers that they face in navigating this domestic and international legal system. So how can like Nepal, also the plus point is being party to this optional protocol to CEDA. What's your say on this? Like, how come this feminist foreign policy framework straighten the mechanism to support all women out here? Thank you, ma'am.
I think we need we need to revive more dialogues as used to happen during 80s and 90s between the South Asian countries and come up with a consensus so that we can have a united voice, to bring up the issues in the global platform. So that's very important because Nepal is much ahead when it comes to feminist policy, foreign policy, and also WPS agenda. The work which Nepal's women's movement has done is quite common. In fact, we have learned a lot from Nepal. So I think it is important to have more dialogue among the 9 South Asian countries on these common issues and have a united voice. I see that as a transnational solidarity is the only solution. I see. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I would like to invite Dr. Deepika Man, Assistant Professor, GD Goenka University, for her session on the feminist approaches to peace building, gendered solutions to conflict resolution. Ma'am, are you there? Deepika ma'am?
Hello. Dr. Deepika, are you there?
Ma'am, you are on mute.
Dr. Deepika is unwell and she won't be able to give the presentation. Yeah.
All right, ma'am. Ma'am, there's one more question in the chat box.
Yeah.
By Shobhana Karthikeyan ji.
Yeah.
She's asking, I have always felt economic empowerment is probably the most important facet of women empowerment. Talking about women's bargaining power at home, at work, at public spaces, everywhere. Now, what are the roles of MNCs in furthering the cause of women empowerment?
Yeah. I think we need to also create a pressure against MNCs which are using women of color and women of global south as a cheapest labor, cheap labor, cheapest labor from third world. That kind of a mentality with the transnational corporations and multinational corporations have. First of all, they have also used so many techniques of increasing vulnerabilities of women in the workforce, basically by going up for a piece rate wage, informalization of women, home-based work, giving women, and especially after the pandemic, we have seen the wages have even gone down in most of the countries, because of the global slowdown of the world economy. And the major burden of this slowdown has been borne by women. So the globalization, as feminist movement says, globalization has been subsidized by women. So globalization is riding on poor women's back because they are the ones who are generating global wealth and not getting anything in return. Very pittance that it is below subsistence wages which they are getting, and that's why so many international women's organizations have now come up, like Women Working Worldwide or the Asian Organization of Committee of Asian Women, or Viego, Women Working Everywhere, Organizing Everywhere. These are the organizations which are which are raising collective voice in the global platform and asking multinational corporations not to, because what they do is that they subcontract and then they wash off their hands from the basic labor standards and the labor relations which are identified and defined by International Labour Organization, that 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours of leisure. That is the formula which after 150 years of working class movement, we got it, but that has been violated. And the piece rate work, they gave it, multinational corporations, transnational corporations, they would subcontract that work. All these mobile companies, they would subcontract the work to the local small scale manufacturer, who would violate all the rules. Women would be employed in an informal sector, and in informal sector there is a law of jungle. So I think this issue, which ILO has raised in the 2019, while the workplace decent work formula which ILO gave, which should take care of labor standard, which care of living wages. Okay, that is there. Third one is no violence at workplace. Sexual harassment at workplace has emerged as a global occupational hazard in the world of work. So these kind of issues, that is why the international unions are taking place. And now there are women's caucuses within the international unions, and there are solely women's unions which are taking up these issues, both in the textile sector, in the ready-made garment sector, in the food processing and food production sector, and also in the e-commerce and the platform-based activities, which are also recruiting women in a big way now. So many women are joining this, whether it is Urban Clap or Uber or Ola or e-commerce delivery as a delivery persons. So I think multinational corporations are guilty of not to enhance their profit, and to that they use the system of subcontracting and not taking any kind of legal or moral responsibility for a gross violation of labor standards and human rights of the working class. So that is been a very, very important concern of the civil society the organizations working with the workers. And now there are many shop floor level struggles which are happening, and they are also joining the global union. And because of the information technology, they have created their special blog, they have created their digital communities, and they have also their WhatsApp groups in which they are sharing their experiences and addressing the issues.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah. Sneha Thomas has written, how can we design research that effectively uses data to measure women empowerment under feminist foreign policy, while also ensuring we truly capture the depth and quality of women's lives experiences, especially the conflict zone. In fact, so many indicators have been developed, even under the WPS, where the evaluation of peacekeeping, peace building, and peacemaking happens in the war-riven nation. And I think even in Rwanda or in Bosnia, Somalia, currently in Sudan, the indicators which are included are, first is, as I told you, those 12 important features of security, then right to food, right to health, education, mobility of women, the workforce participation, standard of living before, after the war, and basic security of tenure, housing issues. So all these issues, the definition of human security has been expanded by feminist foreign policy. And with those indicators, the evaluation is done that to what extent the WPS agenda has been implemented. Could you please share PPT presented by Dr. Vaishali ma'am after the session? Yeah, that is IMPRI's PPT, no? Because that was not visible to me. Yeah, that Vaishali ji, you can answer. Yeah.
I would request Muna Khayal Khatak ji to ask the question. Simran Napit ji.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you, Vaishali ma'am, for such an insightful presentation. I have learned so much from you. And whenever I am listening about challenges to feminist foreign policy, even in the last week and in your presentation also, a term is mentioned recurringly, gendered institutions. So, ma'am, how can we identify gendered institutions? What factors determine that these are the factors that determine an institution as gendered? So, if
Yeah.
you could kindly shed some light on that.
Yeah. So gender implications, that how people from different gender are affected differently when this kind of destabilization takes place due to war. Men would be killed, but women would also killed as well as raped. When it comes to the refugee camp, what kind of facilities, in fact, who will get food first, who will be able to bully the relief workers and get whatever they want, who will be left out. With that, we saw even during the pandemic, no, all the relief workers were saying that it was the bullies of the community, was mainly men, who took away the lion's share of the relief material. Even lonely elderly or women-headed households, which are managed by single women or widow or divorce or a person with disability, they were the ones who were left out of relief this thing. There are social stigmas work against certain people. For example, transgender people, they are left out. In fact, so many relief organizations would say our relief material should not be given to transgender person or a sex worker. No, so this kind of, so there are, same tragedy has a different kind of implications. In fact, during riots, during earthquake in Kutch, when the relief work was taking place, it was a major disaster. Minorities were told this is not meant for people like you. That means the Christians and Muslims, they were left out of this thing. So everywhere, those who are from the who face multiple marginalities of being a woman, being an ethnic minority, being a person with disability, being elderly, or being from the religious minority religious community, or being a stigmatized community, because there is a stigma against transgender, there is a stigma against person facing certain kind of diseases like leprosy. They are the ones who get left out, and they also face more violence, both psychological violence, they face exclusion, and they, in case of women and children, it is also sexual violence. Another thing, trafficking. Men would be, even if the trafficking takes place, men would be trafficked for the cheap labor. Women and would be trafficked, or children would be trafficked, and women would be trafficked even for sexual slavery. No, so this kind of, or the people who the during pandemic we saw in Italy, they adopted the policy of triage. What is triage? In war, when you get wounded, a person who has more chances of being alive is taken, and the person who is wounded very badly is left out to die. Okay, so even in such kind of tragedies, this is what happens. You decide whom to invest more. So if you think that man would be more useful in terms of labor, okay, then you would invest on them. You would feed them more. While in case of children, they are, in any case, they are going to die in the tragedy. No, so you neglect them. Plus, they don't have voice. They are suppressed. Nobody, their experiences are not even treated as legitimate. Nobody even asked them that what happened to you during the war. So their issues don't come out. So when we talk about the gender responsive relief measures or gender responsive implementation, all these things need to be taken care of. When the tsunami took place, in the relief material, there was no sanitary pads. There were no bra and panty. There were no, even the clothes which were sent to the communities were the ones which women never wear. No. So this kind of, had there been sensitivity, they would have made provision for that. Why during the pandemic, emergency maternity wards were converted into corona ward? Women were delivering on the road. The same thing happens at the time of war. Okay, if you don't think that women's reproductive needs are very, very important, you would not give that. Even in the relief camp, we saw 2,000 migrant workers were staying. They had not created even separate section in the bathroom. women and men were taking, and so many of them felt very embarrassed, and they also faced sexual harassment while using the bathroom. Finally, they told the social workers, and the separate section was made. So all these things become very, very important, whether you are constructing the refugee camp, whether you are creating the relief measures, whether you are providing the health services, whether you are providing the counseling, because the counseling services, how you are doing the counseling, the sensitivity in counseling for children, for elderly people, for person with disability, for person with for women, when you how without being judgmental, you do the counseling, and without being making them that they are needy and we are the ones who are great and offering services. That kind of thing should not happen. So that is what we mean by gender sensitive. It is not only approach. Yes, approach translates into allocation of resources, allocation of time, urgency of the problem that you see, no? Because whenever we go to police with a wounded woman, what would they say? Oh, we have so many important cases of murder and drugs. We don't have time for this woman, personal problem of a woman. That attitude comes up even at the time of war. Don't bring your personal. Anything that happens to women is treated as a personal problem, because even in the diplomatic discussions, only men are seen in public. It is their domain. Man's domain is considered to be in a public domain, while women's is that of a private domain. So those prejudices we need to remove, so that we give both, allocate special funds for certain needs of women and children and person with disability and transgender communities and all. Even during Katrina cyclone, the people who were left out of relief were transgender community and elderly, because there was nobody to even voice their concern. They were just excluded. Other communities, they were more vociferous. They came forward. They talked about these things. They sent WhatsApp messages. They sent emergency phone calls, and they got the relief. While plus there are so many people at the time of war. You don't have documentation. So whether you are a legitimate citizen or you are an outsider, because that also counts, no? When currently, if you go to Manipur, and it counts whether you are a legitimate citizen of our country, then you are entitled to relief. Otherwise, you are not. So that also comes out. So there also we have to show sensitivity, that each one needs to be treated equally.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah.
There's one last question from Aditi ji in the chat box. UNSC 1325 emphasizes on increased participation of women in decision-making, conflict resolution, and peace building. However, we only have visible examples of women participation in post-conflict peace building, and the decision-making places remain elusive. Can we say that the resolution's implementation has only reinforced the stereotypical idea of women?
That's what happened. That was told in the previous day too, by this, that if there is a stereotypical way in which the resolution in principle is good, but when it comes to implementation, the stereotypes emerge, because women are perceived by the bureaucrats and the decision makers, mostly male decision makers, as the victims, that they need services, they need attention, they need relief, they need refuge. But their insights and their stories, nobody listens to, and plus they don't have decision-making role in what should be and which way the action should be taken. So that is there. But in certain countries, like, women's voices were heard. For example, in Rwanda, where all men were killed, adult men were killed. There were only children, elderly, and women. And in that type of a crisis where there was just nobody to take care of, it was women who shouldered the responsibility of nation building, which was completely destroyed by the civil ethnic cleansing and the civil war in the country. So sometimes, like, when there is a major challenge that this thing, and women rose to the occasion, and now also in Rwanda, 45% of parliamentarians in Rwanda are women. And the children who were raised by these women and elderly, they are very different from the, they are far more gender sensitive, because the kind of values which were given to them. and the kind of priorities which were decided. The first thing these women who came to power, they did was they destroyed all the liquor dens and replaced them with the milk. And so many countries, they took help because they don't have many domestic animals. The countries like India and South Asia, they provided them cows and buffaloes and all. So these children grew up drinking milk rather than liquor, because they had seen that how this alcoholic man who were not doing anything, they just ended up killing each other without doing unproductive work. Even the syllabus in the school was so much peace-oriented, harmony-oriented. Diversity was promoted by them, the gender diversity, racial diversity, ethnic diversity, the values of cooperation. They were, so when women came to power, the ethos of the nation building also changed. You don't want to come up by killing other. So that whole mercenary feeling, the cutthroat competition, those values were removed, and values of cooperation were brought in. So there have been some very good examples in the post-war countries also. Even you saw last time how in Colombia, 1,000 women signed a petition that we want a pacifist feminist foreign policy. We don't want to support jingoism, because they are fed up of continuous wars and conflicts within the country. So that has also happened. And it takes heavy toll of men. All wars, whether it was the First World War, Second World War, or current wars which are taking place in Global South, and also the major war of Ukraine and Russia versus, and also in Gaza, it is taking a heavy toll of men. Very, very heavy. They die more.
Thank you so much, ma'am. All right. All right. So thank you so much, ma'am, for answering all the questions in such detail.
Now there is an Anita Kapoor has asked that every research has a theoretical framework. What do we exactly include in this? So your theoretical framework, now you are going to listen to more than 30 lectures. So you can decide whether you want to use the intersectional framework perspective, or you want to go by the standpoint theory, or you want to go by the world system analysis, or you want to go by the decolonial understanding, the way our resource person, he talked about transcending the Eurocentrism and focusing on localization. So once you start reading literature on the topic chosen by you, you will be able to identify which theoretical framework you want to use for your chapter. And Dr. Bhattacharya, she also spoke about 4 theories in the international relations, and constructivist theory, feminist theorization, then the diversity, the theory of diversity and cosmopolitanism, and the realistic theory, which is currently implemented by the United States of America. So all these theories, but you do the comparative and literature scan, come up with your review of literature, you do the gap analysis, and then you locate your theory within the framework of feminist foreign policy.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Mayuri ji, do you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for the very enlightening presentation. And my question is a subset of what I had already asked over chat. Do I have to, given the fact that while I was, when I got myself enrolled for this fellowship program, I wasn't, it was a mistake on my part. I wasn't really aware that when a topic of research was being asked, what did it exactly mention? So do I have to now write to you and take a permission to and decide another topic on which I have to submit my presentation and my paper?
It's not a question of another topic, but how you treat whatever you have included in your PhD, you don't include here. So that's not a question of changing the topic, no.
Thank you.
It won't create conflict of interest. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Only the problem is not with us. Problem will be with your guide and your university.
Yes. Yes, I know. I know. I will take his
Because it's a
his-
confidential matter between you and your guide. So till your Viva is over, then it will be on in public domain. So
Yes.
then
I'll have a
you more
discussion.
liberty to convert your chapters into articles.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, ma'am. So with this, we proceed with the formal vote of thanks. And as we conclude the day 3 session of Feminist Foreign Policy Fellowship and Online International Winter School Program, a 3-month immersive online introductory leadership certificate training fellowship program, I, Fiza Mahajan, visiting researcher at IMPRI, would like to express my gratitude on behalf of the Asia Foundation, New Delhi, IMPRI, Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies, and IMPRI, Gender Impact Studies Center, New Delhi. I would like to thank our chair and expert for today's session, Professor Vibhuti Patel-ji, for taking out their valuable time and for their thought-provoking insights on the topic. I would also like to thank Dr. Vaishali Singh for taking us through the discussion on essay and article writing. And we would like to thank all our participants for raising important questions and contributing to the thoughtful dialogue that is essential to this fellowship. Now we would look forward to seeing you on November 8th for the next session, which will feature Professor Mariam Sidat Khan, Professor Anuradha M. Chinoy, and Dr. Manisha Madhava. Thank you all for your engagement today. We hope that this fellowship will be transformative and enriching experience for you. And I wish all of you a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vaishali ji. You need to share the PPT with the participants, your PPT with the participants. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
And about the style of referencing, API style,
Yep.
yeah, that is there. Thank you.